Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, or welcome if you are new. So, today we're going to take a look at a movie from 1980 as part of my current ongoing 1980s horror series. That was a first time watch for me, and definitely a different kind of movie, a different kind of horror movie, and that is the movie from 1980, Altered States, directed by Ken Russell and starring William Hurt. So, yeah, Altered States, let's just go ahead and get into it here. Um, Altered States is a 1980 American science fiction horror film directed by Ken Russell and adapted by playwright and screenwriter Paddy Chayefsky from his 1978 novel of the same name. The novel and the film are based in part on John C. Lilly's sensory deprivation research conducted in isolation tanks under the influence of psycho, psychoactive drugs like mescaline, ketamine, and LSD. The film features elements of both psychological horror and body horror. So basically, the film opens. Edward Jessup is a Columbia University psychopathologist. He's studying schizophrenia and begins to think that our other states of consciousness are as real as our waking states. He begins experimenting with sensory deprivation using a flotation tank, aided by two like-minded researchers, Arthur Rosenberg and Mason Parrish. At a faculty party, he meets fellow whiz kid and his future wife Emily. 7 years later, Edward and Emily have two daughters. One of them is Drew Barrymore, actually, if you pay attention, are on the brink of divorce and reunite with the couple who first introduced them. When Edward hears of the Hinchi tribe, whose members experience share hallucinatory states, he travels to Mexico to participate in their ceremony. During the climb up into the Hinchi Hill Country, a plateau covered in spectacular mushroom shaped ventifacts, Edward is told by his guide, Eduardo Echeverria, that the Hinchi use their ceremonies that the Hinchi use in their ceremonies a potion containing the sacred mushroom Amanita muscaria and the shrub Senashui, where they are collecting for next year's ceremonies. The tribe calls Hema Skofofa by a Hinchi name meaning the first primordial flower in recognition of the deep memory states which it can evoke. An indigenous elder is seen with a root, presumably intended to be Hemia root, in his hand, which he asks Edward to hold before cutting Edward's hand in order to add some drops of blood to the mixture he is preparing. Immediately after consuming the mixture, Edward experiences a bizarre, intense hallucinations, including one of the petrification and subsequent erosion by blown sand of Emily and himself. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, the beginning of Altered States from 1980. I'm sure I butchered a lot of those names and words in there, so I'm aware of that. As far as the cast goes, we have William Hurt as Eddie Jessup, Blair Brown as Emily Jessup, Bob Balaban as Arthur Rosenberg, and Charles Haid as Mason Parrish. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for the 1980 sci-fi horror film Altered States. Um, this is a really good movie, actually. Not as good of a horror movie, although it does have horror aspects to it. But just as a movie, I feel like it's good. So let's just go ahead and get into it. I think the movie has a very interesting idea and premise that's executed very well. So they kind of check both boxes. Sometimes you'll get a movie that has a great idea, but they don't execute it well, and other times you'll get a movie that the idea stinks, but the execution's really good. This movie does both of them. As a result, it makes what's happening a lot creepier and overall effective compared to what it would have been with just having one of those two things. Uh, and on that point, kudos to Ken Russell for a really well visually directed movie that has a lot more to say than just a crazy guy willing to place himself into dangerous experiments. The movie has a lot of depth and different themes, including love. So, but don't let that scare you off. It's not like a romantic comedy you'd see on Hallmark or anything. I mean, there actually is some good sci-fi horror in here as well, but there's definitely those other themes here. So Ken Russell, kudos to you for a well-directed movie. You have very well-written characters, I thought here, especially Eddie and Emily as a couple who have a loving but complicated relationship. Um, they have a nice arc to that whole relationship, and particularly our main character, played by William Hurt, who's not necessarily the most likable character. He's kind of a selfish person, frankly. But at the same time, because of William Hurt's performance, you just get behind him. You kind of understand as a scientist where he's coming from, even though he really goes over the top and basically alienates and kind of ignores a lot of people around him. It's a very complicated kind of character, frankly, and I thought they do a really good job in this movie, giving him a really good arc, which you don't often get in not only horror movies but sci-fi movies or any movie for that matter. So this movie does very well in terms of its writing of the characters. And then speaking of that, the performances of William Hurt, mostly William Hurt, but I thought Blair Brown as Emily did a really good job too. But William Hurt has a really powerful performance to this movie that really works because, again, you take a character that's well written but not necessarily likable, and William Hurt just steps into that character and just really delivers a powerful performance. I don't think this movie works nearly as well if you don't have an actor like William Hurt in that role. I mean, even the dialogue in this movie, which isn't the best written dialogue, frankly, he makes it sound like like art. You know, he really makes the dialogue work a lot better, and I think that's the great sign of a great actor when they can take badly written dialogue or average at best dialogue and make it so that you're not thinking about how bad the dialogue is when you're watching the movie until other characters say it that aren't quite as strong. So yeah, William Hurt, really powerful performance. Also Blair Brown and the whole cast really is good. But we are engaged with all these characters and their relationships. We care what happens to them, you know, especially with Emily, who is more of a sympathetic, likable character, and even Eddie, who's not. We still care about this relationship, and we kind of want everything to work out because of the performances and the writing of those characters. Um, there are some really visually interesting and creepy imagery throughout the movie as part of the psychedelic drug and the deprivation tape combination. I thought it works really well, mostly through solid practical effects that, for the most part, hold up. Yeah, I mean, it's just obviously this movie's all about the visuals. It's all about the trippiness of it, the hallucinogenic scenes and moments of the movie, and especially for 1979, 1980, I thought they really brought that across really well in this movie, and I was quite impressed with the visual imagery, frankly. Also, you got to talk about the score. I thought the score is really strong throughout the movie as it really adds significance to a certain scene or moment when it needs to, but it doesn't overshadow any of the characters or the story. Therefore, overall, it really benefits the movie while still being a powerful score. So, yeah, I was really impressed by the score of this movie. Um, the movie has an emotional aspect to it as well, where it really comes full circle. It's definitely much more than just a visceral, creepy imagery and body horror kind of movie. A little bit like The Fly in that regard, frankly. Obviously, they're different movies, but they're both kind of body horror. This is more, well, that's sci-fi too. They are a little bit closer in that vein, but you also have a relationship going on in the background and the emotions that go along with that. Where one of our main characters is being kind of selfish though in their experiments. So actually, it very much is like the Fly with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis from which would come out 6 years after this. But there's just certain layers to this movie that really make it good. And even if it would have been good if it were just like a visceral movie with good performances, but it's so much more than that. My favorite scene of the movie is probably where William Hurt's character turns into like a prehistoric caveman character and kind of goes ape shit. He kind of goes on a rant and takes, beats up a security guard and runs out into the streets and fights some dogs and ends up in a zoo and ends up eating a goat. And it's pretty intense towards the end of the movie, frankly. So that's the scene that really stood out in this movie. As far as cons go, I really don't have a lot, to be honest with you. I mean, this isn't an overly scary or horrific movie. It's not supposed to be, though. It's not a gory movie. There is some blood and gore, like I said, when he attacks and kills the sheep and starts eating it. He has some blood around his lips at a certain point in the deprivation tank when they take him out. But this isn't that kind of movie, bro. This isn't going to be a gore fest kind of movie. Much more of a psychological body horror kind of movie, but a very trippy movie as well. So when you're in the mood for a trippy movie, I could definitely recommend Altered States from 1980. There's a few of the effects. I talked about the practical effects. I would say 80% of them hold up really well, but there's a few that don't hold up quite as well, kind of showing its age a little bit. And then you can clearly tell that the caveman, Eddie's character when he turns into this prehistoric caveman was clearly played by a different actor, and that's fine, but it's just something you could really notice for the time. So yeah, that's Altered States from 1980. I do recommend this movie. However, I'd like to have a different version of it. I will say that this is not the best. First of all, you got a snapper case here, which I hate snapper cases. They stick out in my collection. But that's neither here nor there. And then I also don't like when they don't really have any artwork on the disc. It's just kind of a blank. One side is widescreen, one side is standard. It just feels like a very cheap presentation, and frankly, a cheap. It's just kind of a cheap version of the movie. I don't know if this movie's out on Blu-ray now. I know it wasn't 4 years ago, but this movie's in need of a Blu-ray. I think that one of the companies really should get Altered States on a Blu-ray if it isn't already. But I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. And you might say, given that I didn't have a lot of cons, why is it not higher? Because I'm judging it on a horror movie basis. And even though it is a good body horror slash sci-fi psychological horror, I can't quite put it among the best of the best from 19. But it is a very good, solid movie that I would definitely recommend checking out for sure. Again, try to find a different version of it than this snapper case that I have from Warner Brothers DVD here. So 7.5 out of 10 for Altered States. Go ahead and comment down below if you guys have seen Altered States, what your thoughts are on it. Do you like it? Do you not? Why not? Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for my 1980 horror series here, as well as any of my other great horror content I have coming out after this series and through next year, so and beyond, of course. So with that being said, I hope you guys are enjoying this review series from the 1980s. Hope everybody's doing well, and as always, you know it, stay scared. Bye.